but let's go. My name is Risa Shimoda. I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society. And we do these river management roundtables each month. And I'm going to quickly pass it off, but I'm thrilled that you're here, and we're very appreciative of our panelists who are here with us today. And I'm going to hand it to Angie Furman, my colleague.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Risa. Yes, we hope you're all joining us for Rivers Now Have Rights in Colorado, today's roundtable. And as Risa mentioned, we do these river management roundtables every month, typically on the second Tuesday. Today we did shift to Monday, so I appreciate you all shifting with us and being here. But we host these virtual conversations for professional river, greenway, and water trail leaders, river managers, folks who will benefit from the experiences of peer-to-peer sharing. So our goal with these is to help facilitate an open forum and help support everyone's work in managing rivers. So thank you again for joining us for today's roundtable. Just a couple quick program notes for today. We are recording and we will be sending this out to everyone who signed up for the roundtable, as well as posting it on the River Management Society YouTube channel. I encourage you all to follow the channel. You'll get updates whenever we post new videos, which is a couple times a month. As well as today, would love to see your faces. It helps make us not feel so lonely up here as we've got our presenters speaking, or at least during conversation. And with that being said, we will have some time for Q&A. You're welcome to put any questions in the chat. I'll be helping monitor that. But at the end, we should have some time for people to come off mute, raise their hand, and when called on, come off mute and be able to ask questions as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and welcome our presenters. And Monty, I am going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself and start sharing.
Thank you. Okay, let me get there. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Monty Aguirre, and I'm a part of the International Rivers team. We're going to be 40 years old next in 2025, and we dedicated our lives also to the protection of rivers and the communities that depend on them. And from the start, our work has been on stopping dams, because we've seen and actually the people that, the two of the main people that were founders of International Rivers, Mark Dubois, some of you might recognize, and then also a British engineer, they start noticing, all the damming going on around the world. And that's really the short story about the beginning of International Rivers. And first from an ecological perspective, but pretty soon with, embedded in the rights of people's right, and now rights of nature. So we started with silenced rivers, as we've seen all this, the consequences of unchecked mining, dams, highways, railroad construction, and development of hydrovías or channelization of rivers throughout the world. And we've seen how that has posed escalating threats for not only indigenous communities, but also for riverine communities as a whole, and have also induced deforestation, pollution of rivers, resources disappearing. So all those cumulative impacts constitute a grave risk for freshwater ecosystems and rivers, as we've seen in the news. And I'm sure there's more recent news to add on to this as to the challenges that we're facing as freshwater quality and free-flowing rivers decimate. And in parallel with that, it's also the absence of policies and laws for the permanent protection of rivers, in that together with the challenges of compliance, enforcement, monitoring, all that creates a vulnerability that endangers the freshwater ecosystems of the world. And new modalities, we start seeing how the rights of rivers starts to take place, starts developing throughout the world. This is just some of the examples. More prominent, and perhaps one that you have heard of, is the Wanganui case, and probably Gary and myself will go into that a little bit more. But where does that, sorry, where does that rights of nature, rights of rivers comes from? Well, it's the recognitions that nature has fundamental rights to exist, to prosper, to be restored, and that is not just the property of humans. It's not a merchandise, but nature itself having rights. Just remember that there's been more or less 200 years of rights in the world. And like from the enslaved people and women's rights, and more in terms of gender and so forth, and this rights of nature emerges also as a as a way of ensuring that we as humans also can think about and on protecting nature, not only for nature itself, but also because it is also the way that we protect ourselves. We ensure our continuity as a species in this world. And then this rights of nature, rights of rivers also includes the cosmovision, the point of view, the knowledge, the scientific knowledge of indigenous people. We start looking at integrating customary laws. We start seeing how this figure of guardians of rivers starts to emanate from this vision. Who's going to protect nature? Who's going to protect the rivers? And what that means is that we're moving away from Descartes, if you will, from that vision of the 16th and 17th century philosophy that separates nature from humans. But at the end, it's really, if it happens it's really a political decision. That's what we've seen happening all throughout. And where does it happen? It can happen in different ways. In negotiations, as we'll see soon, in constitutional amendments, including, an amendment in the Constitution that says that nature has rights, such as in the case of Ecuador. In municipal laws, bylaws, for example, the ones adopted by indigenous people about themselves, laws also, such as in the case of Bolivia. And I must say that that is sort of the way we're also looking at integrating rights of nature, rights of rivers, with laws that have that as a principle, and changing. Then this also has been very important in building jurisprudence, and it really starts piling up right now. We have, at least for rights of rivers, just in Colombia, we have about 12 cases, and they're all different, But what's important here is that building of jurisprudence, builds constitutionality with an epistemological and theoretical support. So this is sort of the basis. And in terms of the principles that are used for the rights of river cases in terms of the judicial, the precautionary measures, prevention, in dubio pro natura, which is a principle that says that when you're in doubt, go for nature, in dubio pro aqua, the same way. When you're in doubt, and this is especially for the judges, right? Go for the protection of water. And so the terms ecocentrism and bioculturalism starts to mix in, how many questions that come to us or that our race are about, does that mean then that if nature has rights, what does that happen? What does it mean in terms of people's rights and so forth? So all that is embedded in these discussions of ecocentrism, bioculturalism. And then now the most recently approved motion, or no, it was a resolution, I believe, or principle, the rights to a healthy environment at the level of the UN. This is really important as it, for the countries that have ratified, it becomes something like ILO 169 for indigenous people. The rights of to a healthy environment really gives the platform where that connection with humans and the environment and nature happens. So there's we already have a lot of principles to draw from. Very important science in the rights of nature, rights of rivers, and science, and I'm gonna make it bigger, not only from this Western scientific community, but also from indigenous people's science. Because it's important that we demonstrate not only in the cases, but also like in the amicus curia, the support or friends of the judge, the court, these kinds of documents that are allowed by the court system in many countries. And what is it that we're talking about? When we talk about the rights of rivers, we have to talk about the connectivity and demonstrate that. The connection between forest and rivers, the health of species and biodiversity. So we talk about the catfish, we talk about the dorado, the fish that need to migrate, but if they're impeded by barriers, we're violating the rights of nature in that sense. We're violating the rights of the rivers. Of course, water quality issues are of the highest important. And talking about that, I think it's really important right now that we improve how we're looking at water quality. And I'm talking about the world in general. I know in the United States, we have some of the higher standards, but that doesn't happen in many parts of the world. So water quality standards need to be improved or considered broader, and the new chemicals are going into the water. So a lot to talk about there. Trying to rush here a little bit. As I mentioned, migrating species also, and the importance of restoring rivers. So rights of nature, rights of rivers, it's about protecting what exists in its, let's say, if we can say, pristine or semi-pristine conditions, but also in restoring. And most of the cases for rights of rivers are going for restoration because of what we spoke about before, how water quality and free-flowing rivers are not are in a very bad condition. So what has happened? This is one of the oldest cases, and this is the Atrato River in Colombia. As you can see, highly polluted by mining. And then the communities and with their lawyers decided to present an legal action. And it took years, but it ended up in the highest court in Colombia, Constitutional Court. And the decision by that court was that not only the communities that were seeking their rights be protected due to the consequences of all this mining, but what the judge also does is also grants rights to the river. So that was just an explosion, and an idea that many people were not expecting that at all. So it really galvanized. It really spread out. Really got into people's mind to think about what does that mean when a judge is granting and the Constitutional Court is granting rights to a river. And just a little bit about the river. very high in mercury, quite polluted, cyanide, children already, cases of children impacted by this polluted water from the river. This is exactly what the court says then, that the human species is only one more species, really, and that the human species is not the owner of other species, of biodiversity, of natural resources. And then the court orders protection, restoration, conservation, and maintenance of the river. And it gives, different terms, long, medium, and short terms. And in the mandate, then it calls for the eradication of illegal mining, the contamination, development of a food security plan, conduct epidemiological and toxicological studies. So that was the case of the Atrato. And this case that actually goes about 140 to 150, that I think that's more accurate, is a case that perhaps many of you have heard about, of the Wanganui River in New Zealand. The name of the river, Wanganui, then it includes, or it encompasses that that respect for the river and the connection between rivers and people, and the continuity of it, from the mountains, the river, to the sea. So as a whole being. For so many years, then the Maori, were the people some of the people living along the Wanganui, after 1840, when the British Crown took over, there was this treaty of Waitangi. But this treaty, really, what it does, it can be interpreted in different ways. It says, Article 2 says, recognize the entire exclusive and undisturbed possession of its lands, forests, fishing areas, and other properties that Maori people possess individually and collectively. But this has been understood, at that point, was understood in different ways. For indigenous people, then it was really important that the river be protected. For the Crown, there was also an interest, of course, in development of the river. The story is long, but the important thing is that through a series of negotiations and changes, then the parliament adopted as law, and that's that act, the Te Awa Tupua, in 1917. And amongst other things, one of the Guardians of the Rivers was created in the law, and incorporating the cosmovision of the Maori people. And these guardians then, that body is constituted by a Maori, as well as representation from the state, and other governance body. I want to say that in the case of the Atrato, which happened later, this was adopted, and the court asked the president of Colombia to constitute this guardianship. So what the president did is the Ministry of the Environment, representation from communities, as well as the Instituto Humboldt, which is Institute scientific body. Rights. And then what are those rights? The Earth Law Center, very dear partner organization and friend of ours, of International Rivers, we worked together. They started the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Rivers, and we began to work together on that. And so those rights are the right to flow, to perform essential functions within its ecosystem, to be free from pollution, to be fed and feed sustainable aquifers, the right to native biodiversity, and to regeneration and restoration. And this, I was in Chile recently, and we're working on the declaration of the rights of the Biobío River. And one thing that was really interesting that came up was that the rights that the river has rights to have its people represent and protect them. This is the thing that the BOBU has been impacted by 3 dams already, and there are more planned. And what has happened is that the Pehuenche community have no access to the river. So it's really important that the river, it's a right of the river to also have its guardian and its guardians to have access to the river. Well, let's stop right there. Thank you very much. All right.
Thanks, Monty. Now we're going to pass it over to Gary. Go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away, Gary.
Thank you. Is sound working okay?
Yep.
Perfect. My name is Gary Walkner. I am based in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I see fellow Coloradans there just introducing themselves, including Matt, who's the Wild and Scenic River Program Manager for the Cache Saputo River. Fort Collins is the home of the Cache Saputo River, and I can talk about that one a little bit too. I run a program called Save the Colorado. We also work in other areas, including the Cache Saputo River. And about 3 years ago, I got together with the Earth Loss Center, which Monte already mentioned, and we decided to kind of take some of the work that Monte described and sort of operationalize it in the state of Colorado to try to start getting rights of nature for rivers in the state of Colorado. And so working on this with the Earth Loss Center, they have a legal team, and we're kind of the outreach team that I work with. And so a few preliminary slides. Next slide. First of all, people in the United States, you say, well, what's wrong with the environmental laws we have right now? Why do you need rights of rivers and rights of nature? Well, as we all know, all the laws that we deal with are very old. The federal laws are 50 years old or more, including the Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, which I work with every day, and I'm actually in lawsuits right now representing rivers based on these acts. But they tend to be relatively weak, and they don't get the job done. And so we're trying to expand the legal toolbox, you might say, to include other things. Next slide. Those are the federal laws. At the state, we also have the State Clean Water Act, and in the state of Colorado, but it's poorly enforced and rife with political manipulations. And at the local level in Colorado, for example, we have local regulations. In Boulder County, we've dealt with 1041 regulations there. We've done those in other counties. Larimer County, which is where Fort Collins and the Prudhoe River are, both the county and the city have 1041 regulations. And those are good. They do some things if they're implemented and enforced, but still we need stronger laws. And so that's why we're working well on rights of nature. Next slide. And Monty just read these off, and these are the rights that her and her organization, International Rivers and the Earth Loss Center, created in the Rights of Rivers campaign, and that we're trying to operationalize on the ground in the state. And it's been fascinating. I can tell stories about the 4 communities that we've done this in so far, in terms of the language of the resolution that we've gotten passed, and how we've had to kind of change the language, change some wordings, do this, do that, dot some I's, cross some T's, etc., to get these rights passed. And so it's been interesting in every place we've done this. Next slide. Monty did mention the Wanganui River in New Zealand. That's me on the Wanganui. I was in there, and I was down there in 2018, and it's really where I kind of got inspired to launch this program in the state of Colorado. I spent a little time down there with some of the Maori tribes people, discussing the issue with them, and I had a great canoe trip, 3-day canoe trip on the Wanganui, and learned a lot about the concept of personhood and rights of nature, and how it can be implemented in the state and local governments in the state of Colorado. Next slide. So the communities that we have done this in so far, and I'll just back up here a little bit and say, there's multiple ways to try to work on this issue at the local level or the state level. In Colorado, you can try to pass ordinances, and at the local level, an ordinance is a law and it's enforceable by law. And everywhere in the United States where ordinances have passed to implement rights of nature, except on Indian reservations, those ordinances have been overturned in court. And they've been what's called preempted. So if you pass a local ordinance, for example, it happened in Florida on some rivers there, it happened for Lake Erie in Cleveland, it happened a few other places where states or other bodies have stepped in and sued and got the ordinances overturned because the state is claiming it has preemptive authority and local governments can't give rights, legal rights to nature or to an inanimate object. As some of you probably are aware, in the United States, people have rights, corporations have rights, legal rights, and municipalities have legal rights. But nature itself does not have a right to exist, nor can nature walk into court and claim that it's been abused or harmed. And so the concept of creating laws to give nature rights is sort of what we're after. But we've decided to do that in this program in the state of Colorado. We're also working in the state of Utah a little bit too, by the way, but which is another story. Remind me to someone make sure and ask me about that. But in the state of Colorado, we decided to pass resolutions rather than ordinances. And the resolutions are softer and gentler, trying to work on the hearts and minds rather than ordinances, because if we would have worked with these local communities to pass ordinances, they would have gotten overturned if someone wanted to overturn them, and the state of Colorado would have stepped in and said they have preemptive authority, and we can't give a right to a river or a creek or a watershed in the state. Only the state can do that, and local government can't do that. But we have passed 4 resolutions so far, and we're working in other places. In Nederland on Boulder Creek. Nederland is about 15 miles west of Boulder, Colorado, which is just northwest of Denver. That was the first place. And the second place was in Ridgway, which is on the Uncompahgre River and the river watershed, and that's in western Colorado. In Grand Lake is up near the headwaters on the other side of the Continental Divide of the Colorado River, and the town board of Grand Lake passed rights of nature for Grand Lake. And then in Lyons, and there's a whole nother story in Lyons where we did this for recently for the St. Vrain Creek and watershed. So all 4 of those places have some version of a rights of nature resolution passed in them. It was passed by the town board in each place, and it was either a town board member, one case the mayor, two cases the mayor, and in one case it was town board members, in one case it was a local citizens group who spearheaded the work, and then we worked with them to get the rights of nature resolution for the watershed and the creeks and the lake written, and then to get it passed by the local town board. We've gotten a lot of media attention for this. This is just one of the, probably a dozen stories or so that have come out around this issue. And then very recently, next slide. We also, and I'm getting to my last point there, but we also worked with the town of Nederland to create guardians, which is the first guardians that have been appointed in the United States to represent nature. And so that was pretty exciting. Well, we got quite a bit of publicity around that too, and including some national and international publicity. So as I mentioned, these rights of nature for creeks, rivers, and watersheds that we're working on in the state of Colorado are non-binding resolutions. They're not ordinances and they're not law. That picture to the right there is the actual St. Vrain Creeks as they flow through the town of Lyons. Lyons is just northwest of Denver as well. And St. Vrain Creek comes out part of Rocky Mountain National Park as well, and then meets in the town of Lyons to form St. Vrain Creek. There's the North Fork and the South Fork, and then it flows on past the town. We're passing resolutions so we avoid contentious litigation. The goal is to start working on the hearts and minds first and create a friendly, wide conversation about giving a voice to nature in town policy and decision making. It also doesn't impact any water rights or existing dams. We've had to tweak the rights of the resolutions in each place to make sure that happens. And each of the resolutions have also given the town boards the opportunity to create guardians. And Nederland has done that. And you might say, well, why create a guardian? What's a guardian? Well, in the United States, because nature cannot be given a right to exist in law and in the state of Colorado, you can, however, appoint guardians in the same way that if a person is too elderly and doesn't have and has some form of dementia and can't represent themselves, they can have a guardian. Or also, obviously, people under a certain age have guardians in courts. And so the concept is to create guardians for nature so that a person can actually walk into the town board and say that I'm the appointed guardian and I'm here representing the voice of nature in the decision making. In the case of Boulder Creek, two guardians were appointed by the town board, and those two people now represent Boulder Creek watershed to the town board. In fact, I just got an email yesterday where a local newspaper was reaching out to the guardians and said, well, what do you think about what's going on with this gold and silver mine just outside of town? You guys are the guardians. What's your opinion, and how are you going to speak about this to the local government? And so, that's the general concept that we're working on. We're also having some conversations in the state of Utah. Any of you follow some of the stories around Great Salt Lake? Obviously, it's been under extreme threat, and there's a local group there that has been advocating for rights of nature for Great Salt Lake. We've had some conversations with folks in Moab on the Colorado River, as well as Castle Valley. In the state of Colorado, we've also had some conversations with folks in Vail and Avon and Durango and Steamboat Springs, potentially create some version of rights of nature there. And we also had long conversation with the city of Fort Collins on the Cache-la-Poudre River. Haven't gotten to the point of passing a resolution there because there's been a long conversation with the city council, the staff, the city attorney's office. And so, when you try to operationalize these things, you end up interacting with the town's attorneys, the water rights attorneys, and the city attorneys, because they have very strong opinions about what can have rights and what can't have rights, and what it means to their town and the water rights in their town. And there's kind of a whole story to tell in each one of those. So I'll kind of wrap it up there. We can open it up for questions about what we're doing in the state of Colorado. Any other questions that you have about what's going on in the United States, or any larger questions you might have for Monty as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. So I'm going to stop sharing at this time. We do have time for questions, so you're welcome to put them into the chat and we can read them out. You're also welcome to raise your hand and come off mute. Yeah, go, Risa.
So, Gary, what are some examples of the effect of the resolutions for rights of nature? Like, what happened? Has it made a difference? Or, I mean, some of, like the guardians, they just got appointed last week.
Sure. The two places where we have definitely had an effect is in Nederland. And the Rights of Nature resolution originally passed in part because some local community members were very concerned about a mining activity that is going on just outside the town boundary. And so they wanted to help beef up the town's body of policy, trying to protect the community and the watershed through the community. And so that is going on there, and it's still going on and still engaged. And then there's actually 3 different places in Grand Lake. You know, some of you may or may not know. You probably don't know, but there's a couple of people there from Colorado, it looks like. Grand Lake used to be it's the biggest natural lake in the state of Colorado. It used to be absolutely crystal clear. You could almost see down sometimes 30 feet, sometimes even almost 100 feet. Now the clarity of the lake is more around 3, 4, 5, 6 feet, maybe sometimes 10 feet, 12 if you're lucky, because there's some serious pollution issues going on there. And so, long story short, the Rights of Nature resolution has sort of helped, I think, galvanize the community and sort of galvanize the interest around protecting the lake and just giving people another voice and another reason to say, hey, we need to do what we can to make the lake cleaner. And then also in the town of Lyons, there's a dam proposed right outside of the town of Lyons. And so we are also intervening in a water rights case by the entity that is trying to proposing, I would say trying, but proposing to build the dam and divert the water. And so that one's kind of just coming to a head. And so in each of these places where we've gotten rights of nature resolutions passed, we've also created some level of commitment where we're working with local community members to help protect the river and the creek or the watershed or the lake. And so we're not just like coming in and passing the resolution and going to the next one. We're trying to create a bit of a program around the watershed where we're helping to protect it with not just rights, but also with various other laws that exist.
I'm gonna follow unless somebody else has a question. So where there isn't a guardian yet designated, and you have an issue or you have a question or like who's in charge, how do you respond to that? Because you can't manage all these rivers. You're so involved with them, but you're not like managing them. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
in every case, there's been local, you know, we didn't instigate this anywhere. It's always been local people who have instigated it. In 2 cases, it was the mayor. In 1 case, it was a town board member. And as I mentioned, in 1 case, it was community members. And in every case, there's been community members who have got on board and spoken in front of the town board and asked for the resolution to be passed. And so, you know, we aren't, you know, as you mentioned, we don't have the power or the capacity in any place to kind of do this. And so it's been interesting to watch in Nederland on Boulder Creek, because that's the first place that guardians have been appointed, and they've already been called into duty just in the last few days about addressing the threat of this mine. So, you know, we're hoping that it kind of obviously grows over time. And, you know, I want to point out too that we're also hoping that we get enough of them that we can create a little bit of movement in the state, and then hopefully work towards, you know, trying to get state laws actually changed so that you can have ordinances in the state of Colorado and not just resolutions.
Can I comment to add to that, please? Right, it's like we mentioned before, you can go to court or you can attempt to change policies and laws. And that's really what we're seeing throughout the world, you know, and a concentration on restoration, you know, not only protecting you know, the rivers, let's say, that are still free flowing and so forth, but restoration and that, I mean, the policies and laws are insufficient for protections, because the policies and law generally protect the humans and the needs of humans, but not of nature. So that's also what's happening. It's like the whole concept, the whole idea of rights of nature, it's sort of pressuring in the legislative also, that so that laws can also be changed to so that include nature, to the protection of nature, not just humans. Over.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks it's really good. The stories are really interesting, and what the rights of nature movement does, it doesn't square with our definition of jurisdiction, our the tradition, or the recently developed traditions of, or definition, who's in charge and who's supposed to do what, or what you're not allowed to do. And so I wondered if anyone else feels it like almost uncomfortable, like you think it's really good and it feels really uncomfortable because it doesn't square with my role managing XYZ River. I don't know if others feel that way.
Okay, while you think about it, let me add another thing, which is about the guardians, the in many countries, there are river basin committees. So what we're trying to do is to integrate that. There's already what exists. Like, one of the things that we do then, and this also as part of the Global River Protection Coalition, how we're advancing is identifying all the existing mechanisms for river protection that there are in all the realms, and some of the things that we find, of course, is that there are river basin committees that presumably or that call for representation, community representation, but they're really weak. There's no funding, and we don't have very good examples of that. So we're trying to strengthen that, identifying in the law what exists already. Can we strengthen it? And so that in a way, so that in some years from now, we won't have to go to court. We will already have the platforms and the protections of nature in law, in the Constitution. And ideally, then we wouldn't have to go to court, which also, it takes many years. Just in the case of the Marañón River, the legal action calling for the rights of the Marañón River. This is Andean Amazon, and one of the greatest tributaries of the Amazon River. We presented the case in 2017, the Kukama women, indigenous women, being the plaintiff. And not only until last year in March, we heard that the case was admitted, and we just had the first hearing, but that's just the beginning. From there to the constitutional court. And we think we're going to win in this first instancia, this first step in the court. We think we're going to win. We've done a lot of communications, a lot of things, and making that area very focus attention in that area at the national level, some international, but at the national level. And we think we're going to win, but we also know that the oil company, Petroperú, and the government are going to appeal. So we need to build it up and build it up. So yeah, I don't know if there are other questions there.
I'll make a quick comment too, Darren just wrote something in there in the chat, and it's a really critical point, is that in the state of Colorado, for example, we have what's called the public trust doctrine, which is the doctrine that states that the people of Colorado actually own all the water in the state. But over basically 2 centuries, the state legislature and the courts have basically given out a water rights system so that people can buy and sell water rights, and companies buy and sell them, cities buy and sell them, farmers have most of the water rights, frackers, etc. And so it's become so the people don't even know what their rights are. They don't even know that they actually have the ultimate right to ownership over the rivers and the water, and they can change the laws if they want to, because it's become so institutionalized and legalized. It becomes just normal. People think, oh, it's normal. This agency is in charge of that, of wildlife or the river or the forest or whatever. Well, the agency doesn't actually own the river or the wildlife or the forest. The people own it, and the agency manages it on your behalf. And so that's one of the lectures, I'm always giving and talking about. And rights of nature kind of takes that all to the very next level, which starts talking about that the river has the right to exist itself, and the river, no one owns the river. The river has the right to exist, and so it should be able to, stand up in court and speak for itself. It's not a property that's owned by people, but it's an entity that is alive. We talk about the river being alive all the time, and it should have a right to claim that it has been harmed, and should have a right to claim that it receives some kind of restoration. And so, you're challenging people's worldviews, and you're challenging, 3 centuries of American law, and it's a fascinating challenge, but I think it's worth it. And it's kind of just, where, and I'm a little older, ending, near, I'm not the end of my career, but I'm nearing the end of my career, and it's kind of where I wanted to drive a stake in the ground, because we do have laws, of course, in the United States, in the state of Colorado, and locally, but they're not very strong. And so we need to enforce those laws whenever we can, but we need to make new laws that are stronger. And so that's why we started working on rights of nature.
You mentioned that the initiatives have been often, or the initiators have been like town people, like a mayor. Like what are the examples in the cities where you've established the rights or the resolutions? Was there like a tipping point, or with the epiphany that Mayor Jones had? Because this is so unusual in this country, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first time it happened was in town of Nederland, and I was literally talking to a friend of mine who was a town board member, and he's like, "Well, we should do that in Nederland." I'm like, "Well, cool, let's do it in Nederland." And so we created, worked with Earth Law Center and created a resolution together, and the town passed it. And when that passed, it got a lot of publicity because it was the first time in the state of Colorado. And then the mayor of the town of Ridgway read about the story and called me on the phone and said, "Hey, let's do this in Ridgway." I said, "Cool, let's do it in Ridgway." So we worked with him to create a resolution, which his town passed. And then the mayor of Lyons called. It actually took 2 years to get this passed in the town of Lyons. But at the same time, we have a big email list, and we were telling the story to our email list, and there was more articles in the newspaper. And so more people heard about it, and more people contacted us. And we're working with another handful of 4 or 5 communities right now. So I'm a little bit optimistic we'll get some more in this year. In the town of Grand Lake, which is another town. It was actually a community member who I worked with in the past, and he's actually worked with me on lawsuits, who wanted to pass it in his town. And he and another community member just basically strong-armed the town board and said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it." And they said, "Okay." And so they did it. And so every place it's been a little bit different. For example, in Fort Collins, we have a dedicated group of people who've been meeting with city council members, meeting with the city attorney's office, going round and round and round, but it's still being a challenge because the city is, not wanting to do this. And so it varies every place in terms of the process, the time. Lyons, for example, the town of Lyons took 2 years. I gave multiple presentations to members of the Environmental Advisory Board, sat down and coffee with a town board member who later was elected to be the mayor. And I think that helped because she brought it forward as mayor, or allowed it to come forward on the agenda. But then also a number of Environmental Advisory Board members got very excited about it and basically passed it on the Environmental Advisory Board, and then asked that it be brought onto the town board agenda, and that's how it got on the town board. So it's been, a process in each place, but a lot of it's, started in Nederland, but then most of it's kind of spread just around publicity. And the latest, the Guardian story got, international attention in Inside Climate News, and I think that's where Risa, you heard about it too, was from from the Inside Climate News story. And so, we're hoping that the word spreads and the concept spreads.
See the question from Royce about any efforts in Michigan, or for that matter, other states. Have you heard? You probably will hear about those, right?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Michigan. I do know, Royce, that and you may know this, the Chippewa Indian tribes passed a rights of nature law for wild rice on their reservation lands. And I think there's 6 or 8 specific reservations and there's various bands of that tribe, or bands that they have. And that occurred in northern Wisconsin. I think maybe might have been a patch of Michigan and also a patch of Minnesota as well, but I'm not completely familiar with that. I did have some outreach recently from one of the river groups in Michigan, no, that was in Wisconsin. So not that I'm aware of Michigan. We'd be happy to chat with you about doing that. Pop me an email. We can have a conversation and talk about it, and see what we can do there.
We do have time for like another question or two, but while folks are thinking through that, I just want to share a few more slides as we are closing out today. And first, I just want to say thank you again to Gary and Monty for sharing with us today. It's been really, really interesting, really informative. And I'm sure they would both be happy to follow up. So if you have any additional questions that you think of, I would say reach out. I also just want to reiterate that we will be sending out this recording, but we will also be adding it to our YouTube channel. I put a link to that in the chat, so you can go check out our YouTube channel. Also, just a couple things we've got coming up. As part of our Wild and Scenic River training series, next week on February, I think that's next week, February 21st, we're going to be looking at the importance of of river value descriptions for wild and scenic rivers. And then also on March 13th, we will be having our first webinar in a 4-part series about hydropower. So our first one's going to be on the 13th, and it's Hydropower Projects 101. So I can put a link in the chat. But you can also find a lot of that information here at the River Training Center website, which I'm going to put in the chat right now. And then lastly, we would love to hear your thoughts on today's roundtable. I'll put another link in the chat to our survey. It should only take a minute to fill out. It's pretty simple, just a few questions, but yeah, we'd love to hear any thoughts that you have about today's session. And I will see if anyone has any last thoughts for today.
Yes, last thought. One of the things that we're doing is working with communities, with groups, with guardians of rivers. International Rivers, we work outside of the United States and Canada and Europe, really. And so what we're doing is developing together declarations for the rights of the river, and why is that important? Or is because that's when you have an opportunity to put people together and to start expressing all the values and what they think about the river, not only the condition that it is, the condition that it was, the condition that it is in, and how do they want to see it in the future? And then through that, what do we need to do then? You know, and the declarations try to encompass all of that, you know, for that specific river. So that's really, I feel a good tool to, you know, get together and begin working on a case. Over.
All right. Well, I don't see anything else in the chat, so just want to say thanks again to everyone and have a great week. It's Monday. I'm like, oh, great week.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Well.